I'm going to go over some more stuff with the drone today, just so in case you work on this over Thanksgiving break, you have a little bit more stuff to go by. Before I do, I wanted to show this other program. This is Fusion 360. This is strictly a modeling program. It can do other stuff like rendering, but it's basically meant more for like exact dimension. So with our drone, it's very loose. We just want wings and stuff in a certain spot. We just move them and shape them however we want. Where this is more precise. So I have here some electronics right there, and I wanted to create a holder for these that I could incorporate all the stuff together. So I needed my dimensions to be exact so that all of these pieces would fit exactly into these areas. I have a speaker, I want the speaker to fit right there, but I also want to make sure that I have a little lip right there so that the speaker doesn't fall through, so it kind of like attaches but it's still inset. And then the same thing on the other side. I have a hole down there, and on the other side it's square. So these are definitely possible to do in Cinema 4D or Maya or any other 3D application. It's just a lot easier to do it here when I could measure something and punch in the exact dimension for this kind of thing. Now, what's also neat about this, one of the things you'll see with Cinema, if I added a bevel to something, I'm kind of like stuck. Like that bevel is just, that's it. If I want to undo it, I have to either undo or I have to delete the edges out and basically like rebuild the surface. With this, it actually keeps a history of all the stuff that I have right at the bottom. And so if I wanted to go back and change anything, all I have to do is go to that spot, change it, and it'll update all the stuff that I have there. So for instance, let's say these two circles on the back here, I'm going to go to where I have those built, and you'll see here's the dimension for those circles. Here's their exact position, like from the center, this is how far out they are, this is how high up they are. If I just go here and say this is now, let's say 20, and this one is 20, you'll see that it moves not only the circles, I'll jump back to my sketch, or jump out of my sketch, but it also moves where those holes are located. So in this sense, it's a lot easier to do. Let's say this is going to be 3D printed. Let's say I 3D print it, and it's just like, you know, the holes are a little bit too big. Instead of me having to go in there and reshape them and then reshape their bevels and reshape all the stuff, it's as simple as that. So future modeling classes, we're actually going to be incorporating this kind of workflow in there because a lot more companies are using this kind of stuff for these kinds of practices. If we were to do a character would be easier to do inside of Cinema or inside of Maya straight out of there. This is not good for that organic modeling where we're just grabbing and pushing and pulling stuff. This is for exact modeling. And if you're more interested in looking at this kind of stuff, YouTube has a bunch of free tutorials for it, obviously. Fusion 360. So I definitely recommend if you want to stick to 3D, at least pick it up, download it, start playing with that tool. It's definitely a neat application. Cool. All right, so this is where we left off last time with the drone, is trying to remember which software we're in so we use the right hotkeys. There we go. So I have all my stuff laid out. I may want to add more detail to this, and this is one of those things that you'll have to decide at what point you want to add detail or at what level. Right now, if I go to the drone body and I start looking at what this looks like, it's very low resolution. Like we talked about before, we can add divisions to this and extrude and do whatever else, but we may need to have a higher level of divisions in order to do what we want to do. So at some point we'll get to this spot where it's like, okay, I'm ready to move on. Like everything I'm going to do at this level of modeling, I'm going to do. I always like to save as. You can do save incremental, whatever. Because once I start doing this, I typically won't try to undo it because it's not very effective. So I'm going to go into my drone body. I'm going to turn off my subdivision. I'm going to go to my symmetry here, and then I'm going to hit C. Okay, and then by hitting C, it basically gets rid of all those symmetries. So instead of it being a symmetried object, they're all just one piece now. Okay, instead of having all the individuals, I have just one piece. Even for these spheres that I have, you'll see that the spheres are still there, but they're all connected, which is fine. I can leave them connected. And then the body is all one shape. Now I want to check to make sure that I don't have a seam, that I don't have anything like where the middle sections are open. So I'm going to go to my edges, double click this edge. It should go all the way around, which it does. I'm going to shift double click, or I'm just going to double click that edge. It should go all the way around. Now in the event that it doesn't go all the way around, this is how we would fix it. We would double click. We may have to zoom in. Typically, if it doesn't line up perfectly, that's where you will get this, where it doesn't go all the way around. It might go like here and then over there, something like that, okay? So I have to grab the center section. I would go to my scale tool, and I would just scale all of these in, all the way to 0. Then I go to this side, I would scale this all the way in to 0 as well. You may have to go, let's say, into your top view, turn on your points, turn on your marquee, make sure tolerant is on, make sure visible is off, marquee all those middle points, go to your scale and scale it that way. I'm showing you several ways because there's not one specific way that will work every single time. The idea here is we need to take these points that are really far away and just bring them together so they're in the exact same spot. That's the whole point of that. Once we've done that, then we can grab everything in the scene and then right click and say optimize. And then that should link all those together. Any points that were not connected are now connected, okay? Now just to show that on a separate object, let me create a plane. And I'll move this up. I'll lower the division so it's a little bit easier to see, 10 and 10. I'm going to go to my faces here, and I'm just going to delete these faces. There we go. So pretend that I mirrored this thing over. I would basically have this seam that runs down the center of it, down the center. If I go to my edges and I double click, I get that edge. I shift, double click that one, I get that edge. As I scale these together, you'll see how it brings them right on top of each other. Now, even though they're on top of each other, they're still not physically connected. I can still go to the points, click on one of the points and move it, and you'll see how it's not connected to that other point. So I would then go into my rectangle selection, marquee all the points, and then optimize. And what that optimize is doing is merging those together so they are one shape. The other thing I could do if I needed to have a little bit more manual work on this, manual control of it, I could use weld. And basically I would grab these 2 points here, go to weld, and then just click, and it'll weld those 2 points together. You can use your spacebar as a toggle between the different tools. So the last tool you were on in the selection, I'm using that as a toggle to get back to the selection tool, spacebar again, click, back to the spacebar, back to that. You'll also notice wherever I click my mouse, that's where it's going to merge. So if I were to click my mouse here, it merges in the middle. If I click my mouse here, it merges off to that side, okay? So I'm going to merge here just to show you what happens when we merge in a different spot, and a different spot, and a different spot, different spot, and a different spot. Okay, so even though these are merged, everything is happy as far as that goes. I still like to have a nice crisp seam down the middle, or crisp line. So I would still, after the fact, scale all this together. And I hold shift so that everything goes straight. There we go. So now that piece is basically what you would do to your drone. Now once I have this all as one piece, I would then subdivide that. There we go. And then I could hit C on it if I needed to. If I wanted to edit this a bit further. You'll notice that when I hit C, there's a bit of a difference from the divisions we're seeing here. Then when I hit C, we get even more refinement, okay? And the reason for that is on this subdivision, there's a subdivisions editor, which is set to 2, and subdivisions render, which is set to 3. This is one of the cool things about Cinema is that it has this ability. If I set this to, let's say, 0, in here it looks like it's rough, but then when I go to render it, wrong one. When I go to render it in the picture viewer, you'll see how it smooths it out. Some softwares don't do that. Some softwares you physically have to say smooth this out as much as I want it smooth, and then when it renders, it'll render it out nice and smooth. In Cinema, we can look at it like this, work on it like this, but then when we render it, it turns out nice and smooth, okay? So when I go to that subdivision and I hit C, it's actually doing that rendered subdivision. That's what it's showing us. So I may want to set this to, let's say, 2 and 2, and then hit C, not R. And now this is baked in. And now I may want to do another level of deformation to this. I may want to add other shapes to this thing. Let's say that I wanted to add in, let's say, where the battery is going to go. I'm going to have a battery that's going to go, let's say, about here. I'm going to go to my selection tool. I'm going to go to here, and I'm just going to marquee an area where, let's say, the battery compartment would be located. That looks good. I don't need to flatten it out or anything. I could, if I wanted this to be a flat area, I could just flatten those pieces and that would make that area look flat. Or I could keep it rounded just like this. If you ever seen the real drone, it's actually contoured to the shape of it so that as it pulls out and pushes in, it matches. So I'm going to extrude this in. Then I'll extrude it. Then I'm going to grab this edge here. So I'm going to go to loop selection. There we go. And then I'll go to my extrude and just push that in. Make sure my create caps is off. Make sure preserve groups is on. And then that should be good. And then I'll add a little bevel right there. You'll see that bevels are going to be a huge help in making this look real. Just having that little bit of a rounding enhances it tremendously. If you don't have it, you'll really notice a difference between having it and not. Because once I subdivide it, I don't want to subdivide it again. I'm going to leave it just like this. So this is my end resolution. Make sure I got them all. I think I did. Little bevel. There we go. And so now we have basically just like a little panel there that could be where the battery would be housed. I could also put a seam on here. I talked about that before. If I go to my select loop tool, no, let's add a different loop. I think I don't like any of the loops I'm getting. So I'm going to grab this one. It goes all the way around. That's what it should be doing. I think I'm going to deselect it from these areas. I don't think I want it here. So I'm just going to hold down Control and deselect this. I may want to add that. I'll do the same thing on this side. And the reason for this is I think that these would be more of like lights or something, and the lights really wouldn't have a seam going down the center of it. That would just be like a piece that gets added in later. Cool. All right. Then I'm going to do a bevel. There we go. And the reason I did the bevel instead of just grabbing that loop is so that I have a consistent width all the way around. Otherwise, I was getting right here in the middle, this was like widening out. Now it's not. Now it's pretty uniform. I will take the subdivisions down to 0, I think. Yes, 0. Good. And then I'm going to grab that loop again. Oops. It does not like something I just did. Let's try that again. Let's try the other one, ring selection. Nope. Did something wrong. Undo, undo. Back to edge. Yes. All right, redo. All right. Let's try that again. So, bevel. That. I think I'm going to put in 2 divisions. Let's try it this way. Yeah, so that's separated. Select loop. There we go. I don't know what's wrong with the first one. All right, so now I'm going to go to my, oops. Try again, face, yes. Select, loop. There. All right, it's widening out there. I don't like how it's widening that. And this is one of those things that it'll happen as you're doing it. It just doesn't play the way you think it's going to play. So let's try this again. So extrude that out. Fixed distance should be good. I don't know why it's getting so thick over there. There you go. That's better now. What's the other side? Oh, that's what's happening. As it's selecting it, it's looping it around, going, bigger on that side. All right, so I guess I'm going back to 1. That, back to 0. Fixed distance, yes. Subdivision 0. Shape round, yes, yes, yes. Select the loop. Faces. Oh, it still wants to grab that whole loop. Let me just verify that's not intersecting it or something. Oh, that's right. It's just being stupid. In this case, I'm going to go inside the spaceship and do it there. Or I'll control deselect that one. I don't know why it wasn't doing that, but whatever. Bless you. Oh, that's why I was doing it, because I was going around to the other side. That makes sense. Just how it's selecting it is just acting funny because of the way it's set up. All right, so I'm just going through, grabbing all these. Again, I may have to go through and deselect some stuff, like around this. So I'll switch back to this tool, hold control, deselect all of these. I may have to zoom in on these if I need to grab not that face, yes. And same thing here. I'm not going to do the whole thing like this. I'm just going to do this part just so you can see it. But again, you may have to get really close so that you don't select stuff that you don't want selected. You don't want in that grouping. Oops. Turn off only visible too. I think that'll help. Yep, there we go. All right, so now I'll try this. Now I'm just going to extrude and just push it in. And so now we'll have a little seam on it. And again, it's a little bit of detail. And that little detail will make it just look more realistic because it has that seam, because real drones have seams on them. Oops, I need an actual model, not that. There you go. So you can see the seam happening right here. Also, these little air vent type things too, you could add little bevels for that as well, or little extrudes. So I could grab this, go to my faces. Let's say I want to add some vents in right here. I could add more divisions if I needed to. I go all the way around and select them on each one, and then I can just extrude that in. Now, if I decided at some point that I do want to smooth this out again, I could add another subdivision, and that would then round off those pieces. It's a little bit too rounded for my liking. So then I would go in and add little bevels all the way around here. Or I would add, I think in this case, the knife loop tool would be the easiest one to just drop in a couple divisions here and there. If you're not going to do a smoothing, the knife loop tool isn't really going to help you. But if you do a smoothing, it definitely does help you keep crisp edges. You can see that looks a lot crisper than it did a minute ago, right? But I would do that on these pieces, all the way around. I would also take this seam off of here so I don't get that. All right. So that would be the next step. So after you're done with the base model, then you can start going into that and adding the second level of detail to it on the smooth version. And then once you're happy with how that's turned out, then the rest of it is organization. So I'm going to go into each one of my items and just hit C on it and give it a name. So that's drone bubble, that already has it. This is my propeller, so I would hit C on that. Okay, that's propeller 1. You'll notice how it names it instance. Here's the other propeller pieces, cube 0, 1, and 2. Here's the propeller cap. Here's the propeller rod, which is underneath it, and then here's the motor house. If I didn't name those originally, then none of that stuff would come over. So on each one of those, I would have to then hit C and then give it a name. So this would be propeller 02. And then this one would be propeller 03. And way down here is propeller 04. Okay, and just like the other pieces, if there's anything I want to do specifically to those, I would then do those specifically to those. Whoops. What did I do wrong here? I didn't hit C on this one. There we go. Yeah. So if I wanted to add any kind of special details to this, maybe something that's a spot that's open here, I could do that. If I do it before I do my renaming, and I do it to that original one. There we go. If I go back to this one, which is my original, which is right here, and I hit C on this, I guess the other ones go away. There we go. Let me go to the motor house and just subdivide that, and then hit C, and now that will transfer over to the other ones. And then now I can take this and just add extra divisions to this or extra detail to it. So I wanted to go here and just add some extra stuff. And again, this is where you're going to spend a lot of time just adding those details. Oops. I have only visible on, so it's selecting stuff in the background. Oops. There we go. That. And what I'm doing is looking at how many I'm selecting, going over a couple, and then pulling it down, and then deselecting, obviously, when I make a mistake. Not too often. All right, so I can go all the way around, but that would be the start of it. Then maybe a little bit of extruding inner, and then extruding inward. So. And again, that's nothing that's going to be major, but you'll see just having that little bit of detail on there helps pick up more material changes and helps make this look a little bit more complex, okay? So I definitely recommend adding these kinds of things in there. And because we've instanced it, you'll see it's on each one of these very easily. Okay, so the next step after you're done with the base modeling is to start organizing your stuff more, start hitting C on it, and then adding in that finer level of detail for when you get there. And then after we get back next week, this is our current day. We are not here on the 21st because of Thanksgiving. We have the 26th, the 28th to work on our stuff. On the 28th, I'll go through the texturing part of this. So basically going from this point, how do we add the materials to it in Cinema? How do we animate it in Cinema? how do we take it into KeyShot, do the animation renders there, and then how do we output it, okay? The third will be a workday. I'll have a lecture up for how to make our demo reel, and then the fifth will be a final exam. So you'll come in and I'll say, here's the exam. You'll work on it throughout the class and then turn it in at the end. And then that's the same day that our drone will be due, the same day our demo reel will be due too, okay? So if you have time over break, definitely get in there to finish it up. Otherwise, plan on this week being a good work week. If you get all your stuff done here, then that last week where we're just doing the exam, you don't have to focus or stress out about doing the exam and the demo reel and finishing up the drone all at once. This is usually a busy week for people rendering their stuff and computers crashing. They love to crash this week. Cool. Any questions? All right.